name. Not Gregory Johnson, what? Jenkins, Officer Jenkins. And we come right back in with cross-examination with Jesse. He pointed out, he said, you said weapons were pointed at you all day, when you arrived on the side of the road, they were pointing weapons at the convoy, at the police convoy. He's saying that when the police metro arrived, that on the sides of the road, everyone was pointing weapons. While they were pointing weapons at me, but he can't describe anyone that was pointing weapons, and he also states consistently all day, people were pointing weapons. Then he quotes, white males were pointing weapons at me all day. We go into Steve Tomasi. Your assignment was to keep the peace between the Bundy supporters and the BLM. And he said yes. And he's like, and the peace could have been broken by either the supporters or the BLM. Were you concerned about the BLM having weapons? And he said no, he was not concerned. So pretty much he wasn't there to keep the peace. He was there to protect the BLM, as that's how he felt. The bridge was not his concern. It came out in that. And he was asked if he saw the BLM point their weapons, and no, he did not, because he was up in between, in the median, in between the two bridges, not down in the wash. Then we go to Engel. Todd says, let it zoom in on the protest, and it was objected to, and said counsel is testifying. Once again, they don't like him calling it a protest. He said, you stated that as you were arriving, they were pointing rifles. He plays a video, and he said, and you said everyone was armed. He asked him to point people out in this video that was armed, and there wasn't anyone. Then we go to Perez. He asked if after the 911 call, because they were on their way back to Las Vegas, then they got a 911 call and had to go back to the wash. He said, did you go with your lights and sirens on? No, they did. He didn't think so, and no, they didn't. Then Jackson gets up there and was talking about how the fact that they had helmets, bullets, tack gear in their vehicles, but they weren't allowed to get it out. And then he was asked if the BLM seemed to be upset because of the way Metro was protecting them. And he said no, they were very thankful all day that the Metro had arrived, which is completely the opposite of what every officer that has come in and testified. Obviously, Jenkins didn't know that, but that is completely the opposite of what every BLM and park ranger has come in and said. And then the government goes back to redirect. He was talked about when the FBI interviewed him, if he had discussed whether there was weapons pointed at him, because in his actual MOA, he doesn't talk about that at all. But when the FBI interviewed him, he was talking about it. And then he was asked about his officers in the skirmish line. And he said, what did you observe of your officers? And he said, they were scared, they were all crying. So what he's testifying is that he had 20 officers, Metro officers, that are supposed to be part of this team that does riot control and all that, and they were standing in a skirmish line crying. Then we go back to recross again, and Tomasi said, on your report on the 12th, in your words, you said nothing about guns being pointed at you. But then after the BLM, or after the FBI started asking you questions, that one is when the other story came out. Then we go to Engel. On April 12th, there was no one harmed or killed, but you rate this as a 10. But you stated there was a riot in Las Vegas where officers were hurt, frozen water bottles and rocks were thrown at them, and that was only rated at a 5. So he brought that up to everyone. Then we go Jackson again. So your officers were crying. How many tears did you wipe away from your officers' eyes? He was obviously objected to, but I think they got their point across. Next was Dennis Michael Lynch. Dennis Michael Lynch come in, and I want to say he was very combative with the government's questions. They were bringing up, stopping parts of his video and bringing stuff up, and he was like, I was trying to get my camera to focus. Like, just because he zooms in on one thing, he said, I'm trying to get my camera to focus and then get B-reels. So we go through a lot of different videos. They break them all up into smaller portions. And he stops it and he says, in this scene, there were 3 people standing dressed in camo. He said, this scene, what are people doing? He's like, well, those 3 people are talking. And he's all, well, what do they look like? And he's like, they're dressed in camo. So they're continually trying to get their narrative across. Then in another part of his video, someone says, we're going to cut that fence and go into the wash. They just pull that out. Lynch was asked where the wash was, and he says, well, I'm from New York, and where I'm from, the wash is laundry. Then they have another video down in the wash, and in the video, Lynch says, hey, 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 and is stopping people from walking, and they all stop and have a prayer circle. And it was asked, why did you say hey, hey, hey? And it was because he thought that the BLM would shoot these people. And then they kept stopping the video and circling people in camo and being like, do you know this person? And he's like, no, I don't know. Like, it's a person in the video, I don't know them. And then he's like, does that person have a firearm? And he's like, well, I can't tell. And this is what they're continually doing through the whole videos. And then he plays it again until he sees a long gun, and he like marks it. 1 long gun with him in the wash, 1. And then he was kind of shocked, and he's like, yeah, okay, I guess that's a long gun. We come back in, we go through more video. In the video, you can hear the loudspeaker a little better than you could hear it apparently when it was being played originally. And so we get to the end of that. You know, obviously they want to keep the questions short with Lynch. He's obviously not giving them what they want. In his video, one person is up at the gate and says, get your guns off of us. They point out pictures of men with guns again. We've pointed out so far in Lynch's videos, I want to say 5 different people with guns, not some 20 plus that they're always talking about. In Tomasi's Cross, he said, did you see a video of Ammon being tased? That was he said, Dennis Michael Lynch said yes, and it was part of the reason that he came, but it was objected to because it's not relevant. It was argued that it was relevant as why he came and why Tomasi's defendant came. That was sustained and made to move on. He was asked if there was an uneasiness that day. He said yes, it was very uneasy down in the wash. He asked if they could see the BLM and if they seemed like they had a lack of leadership. It was yes. Did you see snipers in the wash? No. And then when you met with the FBI, you discussed what happened that day in a meeting. And that was in July 2015. And then a report was generated from that meeting. He saw that report last night, and he went over the report and found that there was inaccurate things inside that report that then he initialed on it. So right here, we've already stated that this gentleman talked to the FBI. The FBI changed his story and wrote in their report different things than Michael Lynch had actually said, and it was pointed out there. So this is one of the things we've got going on. The MOAs are the things that they write right afterwards. It's a memorandum of activity. After any objective, they have to write one out. But the FBI's, when they interview them, there's a discrepancy.
It's a 302.
And the discrepancies are always about guns and pointing weapons and about black hat and all these other things. Then we go into Jess's cross-examination. Jess asks Lynch, do you remember seeing when Metro convoy arrived? And he said, yes. Do you remember anyone pointing weapons at them? No. After they parked, did you see them get in a line? Yes. Did you see the Metro officers crying? No. So pretty much Lynch is throwing, what was the other guy's name? Jenkins' testimony completely out. Just by, he's got video of this, he was there, he saw it. When you said, wait, why did you say that? He said, I did not want to see people get shot or have myself get shot. I didn't want anyone to walk forward because I believed the BLM was going to shoot people if anyone walked forward. And then he talks about how he walked forward, lifted his shirt to show he wasn't armed. Did you see the man with the dog point his weapon at the BLM? Because man with the dog was, once again, one of the people they pointed out in the video. And he said, I never saw anyone point their weapons at the BLM. This is Michael Lynch. I did never see anyone point their weapons at the BLM. And then at the end he said, did you fear being shot? And he said, absolutely. We had a break, and then they brought an entire like pew of law students in, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Jackson comes back up and says, we were shown about 30 minutes of a video. There was some video that was not shown. How much video do you say that you recorded that day? And he said, what we saw in the courtroom today was maybe half or less than what he turned over to the government. And then he also was asked if it appeared that Metro and BLM were working together or cooperating. That was objected to, and he wasn't able to answer. Engel went up and, had a hard time cross-examining. They kept objecting to his questions. He was asking things like, did Cliven tell the militia to go get their guns and get his cows back? Lynch couldn't really remember word for word what was being said at the stage, and they didn't pull the videos up, so we kind of moved on from that. Then he comes to the video where he says, do you recall when they all went to the gate to meet love? Do you recall the man in the black say, it's hard to de-escalate a situation when you have guys in helmets with M16s pointing at us? Then another man with a black hat says, it comes up saying, get those guns off us. Dan Lev says, that's why we're de-escalating this. And then gestures to his men to lower his gun. But we know from everyone else's testimony, they did not do that. Then Leventhal goes up. He asked what his impression of the mood at the rally was, and Lynch said it was boring, and he felt like going back home. Then he gets into Ammon's truck and gets a ride down there. Then he was asked, when you arrived at the parking area, he calls it a rest area, did you see anyone up on the hills? And he said yes. And they were able to get a screenshot of a video in 5036, which shows some snipers. Let's see. When you went back to the protesters in the video, he says the BLM was going to shoot or get shot. He said, don't go out there because the BLM was going to shoot or get shot. There was a lot of communication on this because they were saying, well, that's not what your camera heard, and he had to explain how the camera can pick up things better in a windy situation because of a certain boom mic than you can actually hear with your regular ears. And that it wasn't until later that he got home that you could hear it clearly on the video, but when you were actually standing in the wash, you couldn't make out what they were saying. In the government redirect again, they talked about this guy on the top of the bridge yelling back about the demands, the orders that they're shouting. He was trying to say, well, this guy could actually hear it. There was a bunch of arguments between the lawyers over them saying that the people in the wash couldn't hear. They're saying maybe the people on the bridge could hear better. It was brought back up and replayed, and the guy did not say court order. He said, we don't care about your stinking orders, which could mean anything from whatever you're saying on the loudspeaker. So that wasn't proved. And then he tried to talk about, you stated that you feared you were going to be shot. And then when you went forward. But then you went back to the protesters, and at a later date when the horses came through, you went forward again. And he said, did you not fear you were going to be shot the second time? And he said, yes, I still felt I feared I was going to be shot, but he still didn't. So that's where we ended the day. They haven't called their next witness because it was so late. And that's all I got right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes